What's up, everyone? This is the FIDE Candidates Round 10 recap brought to you by LeeChess.org, as always. My name is Aakaash Meduri, Aakaash Money, National Master from Chicago, and let's get right into the action. So this would be the third round after the previous break due to the coronavirus pandemic. And compared to the first two rounds, rounds 8 and 9, this round is a little bit less eventful, but there's still some interesting stuff that happened today, so let's look into it. First game we've got is Fabiano Caruana against Ding Liren, the number 2 and number 3 players in the world going into this round. So we've got e4, I'm going to turn off the engine real quick, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, Roy Lopez, a6 as opposed to knight f6. I guess Ding wasn't really feeling the Berlin with the knight f6, given that he hasn't been performing too well in the tournament. So he wanted a fighting game, a6. Bishop a4, knight f6, castle. We've got some very standard stuff in the Spanish game. And Fabiano goes a4. Now, the most common move here is c3, and this invites the martial attack for black. So d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes e5, knight e5, rook e5. And black has sacrificed a pawn in this position, but has a lot of very great prospects for an attack on the king side. And this is a very highly theoretical type of position, but a lot of the details and intricacies have been already worked out, and as you can see in the Lichess database, there are a lot of draws in this position. So Fabi decided he didn't want to go into that and goes for a4 instead, which is considered to be an anti-Berlin. So b4, a5, they're just kind of doing some very normal stuff here. Takes, queen c8, and Fabiano goes bishop a3 here, which doesn't protect this a5 pawn. This a5 pawn was already attacked twice, only defended once, but Fabi basically just says, I'm going to pitch that pawn, I'll sacrifice it so I can try to generate some counterplay against Ding. So knight a5, Ding accepts the pawn, queen c2, c5, e5, d takes e5, d takes c5. So this is probably the position that Fabiano had in his mind when he played bishop a3. And so there are definitely some stuff happening here. This pawn on e5 looks pretty weak. They're double pawns, and this c pawn could potentially be an asset. However, Ding Liren is an incredibly strong player. Previously, he did have an unbeaten streak of like 100 games or something like that. So for someone like him, he's easily able to minimize any counterplay chances, even from someone as strong as Fabiano. And that's exactly what happens here. Knight e4, knight takes, rook takes. And, one might be able to say, hey, like this ended up being kind of a boring draw, what's up with that? But this is the reality of Super Grandmaster chess. You're going to have a lot of draws, and so we might have been spoiled from the previous two rounds, but we can't set our expectations way too high. Queen g6, knight g6, and then all of these, a lot of this material ends up being exchanged really quickly, and they just agree, they go for a draw very shortly, right after move 40, notice. So after they've reached time control, both of them had 3 minutes and 4 minutes, and so a draw by repetition occurred here. So that brings Fabi to 5.5 out of 10. Ding has 4 out of 10, so he's still, at the bottom of the rankings, whereas Fabi is definitely one of the leaders in the tournament and has some chances to win the event outright. So next we'll go to MVL versus Giri, another e4 game. d4, knight takes, knight f6, knight c3, and e5. The second time that Giri is playing the Sveshnikov variation of the Sicilian. And I saw something interesting on Twitter where someone was saying that Timur Rajabov, who famously withdrew from this tournament due to concerns with COVID, is working on a Chessable Lifetimes repertoire on the Sveshnikov. And apparently Giri and Rajabov are quite close friends, so maybe there's a chance that Rajabov is working with Giri in his preparation. That could be a reason why Giri's playing the Sveshnikov. I mean, the Sveshnikov is a very popular opening anyways, but it's an interesting theory. If you have any thoughts on this, you think Rajabov is working with Giri, put that stuff in the comments and let us know what you think. So knight b5, d6, and knight d5. So in the previous 2 rounds ago, when Giri faced Nepo, Nepomniachtchi played bishop g5, which is the more common move in this type of position. Whereas I guess MVL, having been aware of that game, decided he wanted to do something different. So he goes knight d5. And knight takes d5, e d5, knight b8. Looks kind of strange to put the knight back on b8. It looks like black doesn't have too much development, but this is all normal theory. So c4, bishop b7, c5, trying to do something against this d6 pawn. Knight d6, queen d6, queen f3. I believe this is the novelty of this game, but to me it just seems like a regular chess game at this point. b6, rook d1, bishop b7, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, and then b5, bishop b3, knight a6, queen e2, attacking the pawn. And Giri does something interesting. He decides that he wants to part ways with his b5 pawn and goes knight c5, eyeing to do knight takes b3, in which case this pawn on d5 might have some long-term weaknesses, plus getting rid of MVL's bishop pair. So an interesting decision, and MVL accepts the pawn, knight b3, a takes b3, to open up the a file for the rook and maybe do something with that. These pawns aren't really too big a liability at this time. So the game kind of fizzles out pretty quickly, to be honest. They make some moves, super grandmaster chess. A lot of just kind of waiting and trying to figure out what to do, where to put the pieces. Giri's really focusing most of his material around this d6 pawn, because while the pawn is still on a dark square, it does limit some of the mobility of MVL's dark squared bishop on c5. So, and MVL, of course, doesn't want to lose this pawn because this pawn is already passed and is giving him a nice space advantage. But one has to keep into account that the presence of opposite-colored bishops does increase the chances of this game just being drawn, and I have a feeling that both players already had a feeling that this game was going to go to a draw, but who knows. Rook e8, rook e1, e4 to play rook g4 and win this pawn. Queen e2, bishop b7, b4, and then queen c6. A very nice move from Giri, just to remind MVL that if you try doing something like queen e7, you are going to get checkmated on g2. And with a move like queen c6, it really just demonstrates how much of a draw this is. There's not much that white can do here. And in this position, both players agreed to a draw. So, not the most sexy or exciting games from the first two, MVL versus Giri, but it is what it is. It happens. And with this game, both MVL and Giri are still tied with Fabiano at 5.5 out of 10. So they're both definitely within striking distance of each other, of Nepo. Now we go to this game. How do I describe this game? This was this was definitely the most bizarre game of the round, for a couple of reasons I'll show you. So e4, e6, d4, d5. We have a French defense coming into the candidates. I believe there were a couple of French defenses that Nepo played in the first part of the tournament. I think this is the first or second one. No, this is the second one of the second half of the event. So knight c3, knight f6, e5, knight d7, knight e2, c5, c3. A very classical position here. This there's a lot of games in this, and I think this is a very well studied position. Bishop e7, knight f3, f6, bishop e3, castle g3, queen b6, queen d2. And then this is the moment that is extremely strange. So if you look at both of the times on their clocks, Wang Hao has an hour and 25 minutes. Grischuk has an hour 31 minutes, so 91 minutes. And Grischuk is probably the most notorious time pressure addict at the very top levels of the game. And so he goes into a think. I have no idea what he was thinking here, but just look at what happens. 91 minutes goes down to 19 minutes. He spent 72 minutes to play c takes d4. I mean, that is just ridiculous to me. Maybe he was trying to remember some prep. Maybe I don't even know. Maybe he was just daydreaming. But 72 minutes for this move just seems absolutely nutty. Especially like at this high of a level, you don't want to get into severe time pressure against this level of opponent. So Wang Hao is probably extremely perplexed here, and he spends 22 minutes of his own trying to figure out what Grischuk was cooking up with this big boy 72-minute think. So Wang Hao goes knight f takes d4, and then knight c5. So after that 72-minute think, Grischuk spends another 5 minutes. Maybe he just wasn't so sure of whatever he was thinking in those 72 minutes to play knight c5. E takes f6, and then bishop takes f6. So after spending 72 minutes, then 5 minutes, he spends about 9 minutes to play bishop takes f6, just to make sure his thoughts are all in order, and whatever plan he's got, it's good. And I mean, I don't even know how to explain this. If you have any theories on what Grischuk was doing, put them in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. But this just seems reckless to me. Grischuk is a madman. Thug life, but thug life to this level is very dubious in my opinion. So knight b3, knight e4, queen d3. So I mean, at least he got a very nicely centralized knight out of it. Queen c7, bishop g2, knight d6, bishop f2, knight c4, knight e7. And something very interesting happens now. Bishop f5. So Wang Hao has 22 minutes on his clock. Grischuk has 1 minute on his clock. And Wang Hao decides to make a very interesting practical decision. So in this particular position, perhaps a move like queen d1 makes some sense, just to get the queen out of harm's way. Bishop takes e5, knight e d4, bishop d7, queen c2, and something like this. I think this is just an engine line. Seems like there's a lot of game left to be played here. But Wang Hao has some different ideas. Wang Hao is also a member of Thug Life, it looks like. And Wang Hao goes e takes f6, sacrificing the queen to perhaps confuse Grischuk, who only has a minute on his clock to make 19 moves against a 2700 rated player. And I gotta say, the engine isn't the biggest fan of this move, but I love it. I mean, so there are some... Wang Hao is going to get some material back for the queen, but I just love the practical decision here to force your opponent into perhaps some unexpected territories while they are down so much time. It's not even like Grischuk can go to the bathroom and take a break from this position. No, he's got to stay in his seat, because if he uses the bathroom, he is going to run out of time. So bishop c2, of course he takes the queen. fe7, rook fe8, knight f4, knight b6, knight takes d5. Engine is giving bishop takes b6 here. I'm honestly not so sure. Let's just take a look at that. Bishop takes b6, queen b6, knight d4, bishop e4, knight takes, bishop takes, and then rook f7, saying that the coordination of these pieces is very, very strong, and perhaps this rook is going to come in here to further support the pawn on e7, and there might be some fun stuff here. But anyways, so knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, king h8, knight d4, c4. You want to keep the bishop pair if you can as Wang Hao, because this is a very open position, and the bishop pair is going to constantly harass the black king. So bishop g6, knight e6, and finally Grischuk gets rook takes e7 in. But you know, if you look at the engine, it's minus 2.3 here. But Wang Hao's pieces are incredibly active. So what is the material count right now? It's 2 minor pieces and a pawn for a queen. So if we add that up, it's 7 points to 9 points. But the activity of the position that Wang Hao has is some sort of compensation. So we can't really, I don't really know if we can take this too seriously, especially when two humans are playing against each other. Bishop f7, knight g7, a very nice move. And if king takes g7, I forget what happens here. I think bishop d4. And let's just double check with the engine. King g8. Oh, whoops. King g8, and then rook e7. Yeah, queen e7. Rook takes f7. I didn't need the engine for that. That was pretty easy. But anyways. So yeah, knight takes g7, a very interesting move. Bishop takes d5, rook e7, queen e7, knight f5. And so there's still a lot of stuff here. As you can see, both players are in time pressure, and they're trying to race to get to 40 moves so that they can gain more time. Queen f8, bishop d4, king g8, takes, h5. h5 to, you know, create some breathing room for the king. If you're careless in this type of position, let's just imagine the pawn gets here. A move like knight h6 is very nasty, forcing black to give up the queen for the knight. So h5 is more of just a safe, cautious move from Grischuk. So d6, we've got another pawn that's really barreling down. King h7, knight e7, queen e8, rook f6, rook d8. Bishop c3 takes, queen takes, rook d4. And then king g6, a3, queen e3. It's in this position that they both agreed to a draw. And the reason is, other than the fact that material is dead equal right now, with the rook, bishop, and pawn equaling the queen in terms of material count, the point of this position really is that neither side will be able to make progress. This bishop is anchored to these pawns on b2 and a3. The rook is likely going to stay on dark squares for the entire time. And if you just imagine the rook shuffling between f4 and d4, there's no realistic way for black to break through. So, an interesting game, honestly, probably the most interesting game of the round, especially when you add Grischuk's crazy time management into the equation and Wang Hao's queen sacrifice. So that was definitely an entertaining game. And after that, both Wang Hao and Grischuk have 4.5 out of 10. So still -1. Probably not a realistic shot for either of them to win candidates at this point, but they're still playing for rating, and they're going to play for pride. So the last game of the round is Nepo and Alekseenko, another Russian battle. And this game has a little bit of, how to say it, a little bit of controversy online. So I'll get into that later. So c4, signaling that Nepo wants to play in English. Knight f6, g3, e6, bishop g2, d5, knight f3, takes, queen a4, queen takes c4. And now, actually, at this point, while it was originally an English defense, Nepo starts playing this a little bit differently, and it morphs into a neo-Catalan. So not exactly a Catalan because c4 was played, but a neo-Catalan, if you will. And I think by doing this, it seems like Alekseenko, who again is the youngest person and least experienced player in the candidates crowd, likely got extremely confused about what to do, maybe mixed up some of his plans based off of the formation, and the game, well, we'll see. So castle, d4. So now, after d4, it definitely resembles more of a Catalan. White has a very good position already here, though. Look, the engine's giving +1, but why is the engine giving +1? I mean, this looks somewhat normal, right? Well, the reason is, if you look at all of White's pieces, perhaps not this bishop on c1, but the bishop on g2, these two knights, the queen, there's a lot of activity that White has, and it's a very open game. Whereas for Black's pieces, they're struggling to find their ideal spot on the board. And if you look at this bishop on c8, the bishop on c8 is really going to struggle. It's having an identity crisis. It doesn't know where it belongs. So that bishop doesn't feel too good, and so that's why the engine is giving an evaluation of +1 already, even though it seems kind of like a normal position. Queen c7, rook d1, rook d8, bishop e3, so White has almost completed the development. Knight b6, rook c1, now he's completed it. e5. e5 is trying to get some life for this bishop, this light-scored bishop. Knight f5, and bishop takes f5. So you can already tell that Alekseenko is very uncomfortable with his position based off the fact that he did do bishop takes f5. The bishop normally wouldn't be exchanged off with the knight, especially in this type of open position, but it seems like Alekseenko felt that this knight is too active here, and he didn't want to give Nepo just a very easy game with that knight. Instead, Alekseenko could have potentially played bishop f8, whereas there's this clearly engine line. Knight takes g7, kind of a bizarre move. King takes g7, queen b3, knight c4, rook d8, knight e3, rook f8. I mean, bro, this is just crazy. Bishop e6, queen b7, bishop b7, rook f8, and yeah, I'm not even gonna try to explain why that happened, but it just demonstrates like how this knight is very well placed here. If a tactic like knight g7 is possible and is in the cards. So Alekseenko goes bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, knight c4, bishop g5, rook d1, knight d1. Importantly, knight d1, not rook d1, because you want to take advantage of the fact that there's a pin on the queen and the knight. Alekseenko goes rook d8, and it looks like a very natural move. But this just underscores how bad this position really is for Black. Rook d8, and some very nice technique by Nepo. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and then this bishop e4 move. And already, believe it or not, Black is lost. Bishop e4 is so strong because Black would love to play g6. Problem is, there's a queen on f5, and then this bishop's not going to be very happy. In fact, the bishop's not going to be here with us much longer if Black plays g6. So this pawn is basically lost right now. And if something like h6, I believe queen h7 should be good. If not even queen h7, something like b3, targeting this knight here. So there's a lot of problems that Alekseenko has in this position. So queen a5 to get out of the pin. Also right now, if rook takes c4, you can take the knight on d1. So knight c3. Just getting out of there. It's very interesting how Nepo doesn't even feel the urgency to do queen takes h7. He just decides to play knight c3 and says, okay, I'm better, so what are you going to do now? So king f8, Alekseenko has clearly accepted his fate. Knight d5, b5, queen h7, rook d5, bishop d5, queen d2. And then rook c4. Another nice move. And Nepo gets into this queen and opposite colored bishop endgame, but because his position is just so superior, he doesn't even think that there are realistic drawing chances for Alekseenko. So queen b2, queen h8, king e7, queen c8, gotta try to rally this pawn if necessary. Queen b6, queen c4, queen b5, queen c7, queen d7, queen c5. And actually, Alekseenko threw in the towel and resigned here. Probably partly out of frustration, but also if a move like queen d6, queen a7 comes, and this pawn's going to be picked off very shortly after queen d7, queen takes a6. So a very weird game in that Nepo seemingly easily beat Alekseenko. And so the controversy from this game comes from the online community, as always. And so I was looking on r/chess, and a lot of people were claiming that Alekseenko threw this game because they're both Russian. They were citing the Fischer story where he played in Russia, and then there was collusion, and claiming that something like that happened here. I'll be honest, I think that that's all just nonsense. I think that Alekseenko is the most inexperienced player, and so this weird move order to transpose into this Catalan-like position for Nepo really just threw Alekseenko off. Not to mention, I think all of these players have a very high level of integrity, and I don't think that Alekseenko would do that. But hey, conspiracy theorists love to consider possibilities like this. So if you have any thoughts on this, put them in the comments. Let's see what you think. Was this a legit game, or was it a thrown game? And with that, so Nepo actually moves to 6.5 out of 10, and Alekseenko has 4 out of 10. And another noteworthy point, not only is Nepo 1 point ahead of the field, but also with this win and with the draw in the Fabiano Dingley endgame, Nepo moves to number 3 in the world on the live ratings list. So it goes Carlsen, Caruana, Nepo, and then Ding. Kind of wild. So Nepo's got to be feeling pretty damn good right now, I imagine. So we'll take a look real quick at the results where we are. As I said, Nepo with 6.5 out of 10. We got the 3 people right behind at 5.5 out of 10. Fabi, MVL, Giri. But, there's not that many rounds left, and so they've got a lot of work to do if they want to catch Nepo at this point. It's going to be pretty difficult, but it's really only these 4 that have a chance of winning, but Nepo's got to be the heavy favorite. Grischuk and Wang Hao have 4.5 out of 10, and then Dingleren and Alekseenko have 4 out of 10. So should be exciting to see what happens kind of moving forward in the last leg of the event. We've got 4 rounds left in the tournament, and I'm excited to see if Nepo can continue his hot streak in the candidates. Alright guys, so that wraps up the video. If you liked it, please smash the like button, hit subscribe to the LeeChess.org channel on YouTube. Also consider becoming a patron of LeeChess.org. It is run by volunteers primarily. It's a nonprofit and needs support from people that love the platform, so do consider donating. And if you like my commentary, follow me on Twitch, follow me on YouTube, twitch.tv/Aakaash, that's AAKAASH, and youtube.com/Aakaash. Alright guys, until next time, peace out.